Hello, YouTube fans. It's Dr. Matthew Johnson. It is Saturday morning, November 28th, 2020, 11:20 a.m. in the morning. And I'm sitting in the Holiday Inn Express in Grants Pass, Oregon. Just had some time with my little buddy Grady, my youngest son. He's going to go get a new puppy, and I'm going to take some time at the hotel to put this video together. I have different segments I have to edit together. But anyway, about 3, 4 weeks ago, Zor said, I want you to film an interview with Cynthia, and I want you to put it online. I want everybody to get to know her a little better. The reason being is because behind every great man, not that I'd call myself a great man, but the saying goes, behind every great man is a greater woman. And Cynthia is definitely a greater woman. So Zorth wants all of you to get to know her a little better. She is naturally introverted, shy, keeps to herself, isn't really a upfront person. So people get to know her when they come over for our weekend events during the summer. But Zorth wanted you all to get to know her a little better. So anyway, on the day before Thanksgiving, we had a gentleman show up to our house to do some filming for a documentary. He has already filmed Joe Bielert and Ron Moorhead. He's going to be filming Bob Gimlin and a few other people. So anyway, he's including us in that documentary. But he's also trying to put together something for a TV show he's trying to promote down the road as well. So that was pretty exciting. And so he came to our house a day before Thanksgiving and interviewed me. Took a lot of time to do that. And then Thursday morning, on Thanksgiving morning, we got up early and it was all about filming Cynthia. And I'm sitting there because he wants me to help man his camera because it's just him. His film crew isn't there because of COVID-19. And all of a sudden, Zorth goes, hello, knucklehead. I said I wanted you to film an interview. And I'm like, oh. I was thinking Zorth wanted me to interview Cynthia, but it turns out that Bill Badgley, was interviewing her, and it was like, oh, okay, I'll get my phone out and start recording. So I didn't catch the very beginning, but we only missed about a minute or two. So anyway, Bill asked a lot of awesome questions, and I think you'll agree with me that Cynthia did a wonderful job answering those questions. So anyway, I'm going to splice and dice and put this video together of Bill Badgley interviewing Cynthia Kreitzberg Johnson, the greater woman, the one behind me. And if you have appreciated all these videos, everything you've learned from me, if you've appreciated the 2 books I've written, then you need to understand that none of that would have been possible if Cynthia wasn't involved. So even though she's introverted, shy, and in the background, she's the reason why all this has happened. So you kick on back, get the popcorn out, and enjoy the interview.
I love that wrap the couches in clean blankets. You're like, oh. Oh, you know what? I want to do something. I've been doing something with all of them where I start recording and have you enter from out of frame.
At our 30th high school reunion 10 years ago, and that is when, that very first day, Matt told me about his experience above the Oregon caves, and he told me later, he said, if you thought I was crazy and were going to kick me to the curb, I wanted to tap him then. And I was receptive, and so that's how I wound up joining him on this rather unexpected journey. Just watching his physiological responses, the vein in his temple was starting to throb. He actually got choked up when he was talking about how scared he was for his family. Those are not things that you can fake. And so I had no question but that his experience was extremely real. And I didn't have any preconceived notions because I hadn't done a lot of research about the Sasquatch. So I was just a sponge at that point and very willing to learn and discover more about what he was talking about.
Why was the emotional reaction so important to you?
To me, it established how much of an impact it had had on him and helped me understand why, 2 hours into meeting this person, he was sharing this with me. It obviously was an event that had left a very, very deep mark on him. And he was very, very honest about what it had done mentally to him, is to kind of turn his sense of reality upside down. And he was bound and determined to find out who or what it really was that had done that.
What was your impression of how large or small a part this played in his life?
At that point, I could tell it was significant, not to the degree that it later turned into. And that's not a complaint. It's been a journey he and I have been on together, because I came into his life about the time he abandoned the old school approach and started more of the habituation. And for a while it was a little bit back and forth because he'd been doing the old style for so long. But I got to kind of be in on the ground level of all that, and the experiences we had as we started responding or interacting that way were incredible.
What was that like for you to not have the sort of 10-year build-up that he had and sort of dive right in to the change?
Like I said, in some ways it was an advantage because I had no preconceived notions. My first kind of immersion experience was at a conference and got to talk to a lot of different people. And the question I kept asking is, what are they? What are they? And one individual who's a friend of ours and who's been involved with investigations for many years said, they're a people. And my brain is going, okay, humans that somehow became feral and grew hair, and that's where I started, because we were such a human-centric society, and that's the entire focus of how we're raised. And so I had that disjoint in my own head that I had to overcome. No, they're totally separate from us. They're totally different from us. We can't use our measurement of ourselves to compare to them. We really need to, just like walking into any culture, trying to drop any assumptions you might have and just learn from the people in that environment.
That's a beautiful sentiment, that we can't use ourselves as a measuring stick. I was just thinking, hardly anyone could do that, right? I mean, how difficult is that?
It's extremely difficult, because we even, we do the same thing with our animals. We look at them, they must be reacting the way we would react. They don't. They're a different species. Some of the species that show very high intelligence, whales, dolphins, even the octopi, they're very, very foreign to us. And if we try and say that their behavior is going to match our behavior, that what drives them is the same as what drives us, then we're going to make mistakes. And because I kind of got pushed off into the deep end, I think in some ways it was easier for me to do that because it was all brand new.
So in a sense, you didn't transition, you started there.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
So describe for me a bit of that voyage. You get there and you kind of start at this question of like, sounds like you're sort of thinking like flesh and blood kind of thing, and then where do you go?
Well, for the first several years, it was very much flesh and blood, and yet more and more evidence pointed to them. We called it cloaking, being able to visually camouflage from our being able to see them. And we had, I can't even begin to describe all the different circumstances that made that more and more and more real to us. But being able to hear movement, know that we should be able to see them and have nothing there. And that was occurring with sufficient regularity that we said, okay, they cloak. They have the ability to become invisible to us. And then later, and then they have the choice, they can also uncloak. Later, we figured out that it's not that way. They don't cloak, that's their natural state. Because of the vibrational frequency, we can't perceive them. They have to choose to slow down to be visible to us. And that was one huge turning point. The other huge turning point was when Matt started getting the language, the recordings around camp. And again, that was, okay, we're hearing them, we're not seeing them. They're obviously here. In some cases, those voices were very, very close, and we still were not seeing them. So those two things were kind of coming together to start to paint a picture that we really needed to reevaluate what we were dealing with.
Is there an easy way to describe what cloaking is?
I think Matt's description that they vibrate, our eyes are set at, I think it's 60 frames per second. They vibrate faster than that, so it's kind of like if you look at a ceiling fan that's twirling fast, all you can see is that blur. And if you blink or try and follow one of the fan blades, you can see it momentarily, but otherwise it's just a blur. So imagine an entity vibrating so fast that our eyes can't perceive the solid because of that movement. And that is what we say is cloaking.
So when you say you find out that it's not them cloaking from, I'm confusing myself, but their
natural state isn't physically visible. Their natural state is not visible to us. And then they have to make the choice to take that step to be physically visible to us.
So
Which explained a lot.
So is it a two-way road though? Like, are they doing something with their frequencies in order to be seen, and are you doing something with your sort of state of being and or frequency to be able to see them?
Yes. I think, like in the Patterson Gimlin film and the physical visuals that Matt had above the Oregon caves and some of the visuals I've had, they have actually slowed down their vibration in order for us to perceive them in that form. Over time, as Matt understood that their natural form was that higher vibration, he's become very, very adept at seeing them in that kind of energy form. Direct on, I have problems with it. I have a better chance of seeing them if I just let my peripheral vision kind of go soft. Then I'll see the movement or I'll perceive that shimmer. If I look directly at it, I have a harder time. So it's something that some people are very good at very quickly, other people struggle with.
What do you see as the difference between people who saving the cough, huh?
Yeah.
That's a trick. That's a good one.
Yep.
I recognize the sound of that.
Yep.
So what do you see as the difference between people who kind of have an easier time versus people who have a more difficult time?
Younger people tend to be able to see them more quickly. I think we're taught to not see things. Experience, although there's some people who, when they show up, they can see them immediately. We have a friend who's blind, but who can see them in his mind, and was actually able to stand up and navigate to where they were standing, but he's not seeing them with his physical eyes. So I think there's a lot of different factors. Confidence is always a factor. Trust your senses is another one. I'm very analytical, so I second guess myself way too much. Whereas if I can just relax, sit back, and allow myself to experience, I'm more likely to see them. Everybody's got aptitudes, everybody's got abilities, everybody's, DNA is slightly different. So I think it'll be a long time before we fully have an answer to that question.
What was the moment where it like sort of became yours? Because you sort of start with hearing it from Matt, and then you obviously seem like you've moved through a doorway where it's become very personal to you. Is there a moment that you can sort of look back to where you see that shift?
We were in Oregon at the area we called SOA, the Southern Oregon Habituation Area, and the campsite was on top of a ridge, and we had gone down the ridge because there were just a ton of footprints down that way. We thought there might be bedding areas or there might be a cave, and we were trying to work our way over to it. And as we never found it, but as we were coming back up the hill, it's steep enough that I'm on toes and hands coming back up the hill. And then all of a sudden, in the dirt, between my hands, there is a Sasquatch footprint that's only about that big. And it's a young one. And that was kind of okay, it really, really, really is real for me. And then they started doing a lot of, we call them glyphs, but we would go out on a hike. We came back one time and there was like 18 pine cones in a direct line. And then at the end of it, there was some bark and sticks and pine cones in a pattern. And that was definitely deliberate. It was definitely a hi, we're here. And that's when I started feeling like they were reaching out. And you know, it was so different, so unique, I definitely wanted to reach back.
And then why do you think when the vocalization started to occur, what was your idea of like what was the linchpin for that, or why that started to occur?
Well, Matt had started recording and using it's called a bionic ear, so it captures sounds from a ways away from the campsite as well as right in the campsite. And those early recordings, they were whispering much of the time. We would not have caught that without that bionic ear, you know, helping to amplify those noises. And then the first time we'd heard the samurai chatter. Ron Moorhead's recordings from up in the Sierra Nevada mountains are amazing. But when we actually started hearing words that were more clear to us as being language, not being linguists, but you know, to really hear syllables and vowels, and that took it from, okay, we're definitely not dealing with a mountain ape. We are dealing with a sentient species with language, with culture. You know, we were hearing singing. We were hearing patterns in the speech that later we identified as consistent responses. So that just catapulted it into, we're doing the right thing. Habituation is the way to approach this, because these are not animals.
If you were to sort of sum it up in a sentence or two, what do you see as being the main difference between the Ron's tapes and your tapes?
Ron's tapes, I think, are very much the native language of the Xanue, but I think in our tapes, they're allowing us to hear more recognizable. I think they were intentionally giving us something that we could hear and that was recognizable to us. So to me, it was part of their outreach, if you will, is to take that into more of a language structure we would hear and recognize.
How would you describe the emotional state that is optimal to be in order to have an encounter?
For one thing, no fear. And
could you say that in a standalone statement? Like instead of answering me?
One of the most important things if you want to have an interaction with the Xanue is you really need to not be fearful. They don't want to scare us. If we go into it fearful, we're not going to have the experience. So as much as possible, and I think that's one of the advantages I had growing up in the woods, out at night, I didn't have that fear of the dark. And so I think it was easier for me than to also not be afraid of them in that setting, because that's their home, that's their environment. So that's the number one, no fear. The second thing is just relax and be open. Let yourself, as I mentioned, I'm a very analytical person, so I started out and I would be, every time something happened, I would be wrestling with, is it them or is it not them? Is it them or, I'm trying to put it in boxes at the time. And I finally learned to just, okay, that's a data point, that's a data point, that's a data point, this is occurring. And then over time, I could look at the patterns of multiple experiences, but that way I was more present in the moment. I was where my feet were. I wasn't thinking ahead, behind, trying to process, analyze, or decide. I just let myself experience. And that was a huge breakthrough for me in terms of being able to really open myself up to the experience.
And that's not really a mindset that our culture prepares us for, is it?
No, some people find it easier than others. Like I said, I'm analytical, but no, we are taught that this is reality and anything that occurs outside of it is just your mind playing tricks on you. So you need to discount it, you need to minimize it, you need to, my eyes were playing tricks on me, it's not real. And some of the experiences I've had, it would be very easy to do that because we are raised to push anything out of the norm, out of our consciousness and not deal with it. So as you get more practice and you get more experiences, then it's a little easier to open up that box and kind of pull that stuff in. But I still have to remind myself periodically, these things have happened. And there's no way to explain them given what I was raised with and what I was taught growing up.
What was it like for you to see the world reveal itself to be a bigger and or different place than you believed it to be this entire time?
I grew up reading books. Sophie Keatley-Snyder was one of my favorite, and there were always activities and things occurring in those books that were outside of the norm. I always wanted that in my life and never experienced it. So when we started having these experiences with the Xanue that were pushing outside the box, that were way beyond what I was told was real, it was a treasure, because it was like, yes, our world is bigger than I was taught. Yes, the world is bigger than we believe. There's a whole lot more out there, and for us to believe that we have already reached understanding of our entire universe is just insanity. We understand such a small part of the reality of our universe. We're just beginning to grow, and people say, you have to be scientific. Our science is in its infancy. At some point you have to say, there's things going on that don't fit our science, but they are occurring. So we haven't caught up with being able to explain them yet. That doesn't mean they aren't happening.
So actually I want to reframe my shot.
She's been, just so you know, she's been focused the whole time.
It stops and knowledge and our understanding continues. You know what I mean? On a continuum.
The scientific community, they've got a lot that they're trying to wrap their heads around. There's a lot that we're still trying to explain and understand. There's the whole story about how do you eat an elephant? You eat an elephant one bite at a time. So science is eating this elephant that is our universe or is our reality one bite at a time. And they move to different parts of the elephant based on what's important at any given time, what their interests are, what the data is that's coming in. For us in this kind of niche looking for or interacting with this creature that has been named Sasquatch is not attracting scientific exploration. They've got too much going on. So from that standpoint, I don't have a problem with that. But I do have a problem with people who say, you can't prove it scientifically. Well, what is scientific proof? It is observation. It is repeatable outcomes. And as long as you're doing that in a controlled environment, that is the scientific process. And that's what Matt did in SOA. He set up a repeatable process. He would go there. There were certain behaviors. There were protocols he set up. It was a very consistent interaction model, and we were getting consistent results. So what is that but scientific proof that yes, there is something there that is interacting with us? Is we would put the food bowls out, we would bring them back in the morning, and there would be fingerprints on them. And Matt would wear gloves when he put the bowls out. We wiped down the bowls before we put the food in them, and he picked them up with the gloves on. So, that is evidence. And over time, we were gathering more and more and more evidence. And then we reached the point where I think it was like, okay, we've got the evidence, now what do we do? And that's when Matt really kind of, opened the door to more of the interaction, less of the proof to me you exist, and more of the, okay, you're there, how do we move to communicating, how do we move to having some kind of relationship, a give and take, a back and forth. And I think I kind of went off the topic of science, but it is a model and it is valid despite the fact that people say that Matt has not used a scientific approach. We have.
And so where does it go? If you wanted to just tell me really quick, what are the kinds of evidence that you've collected, the types?
There's the vocals. There's the...
I'm sorry, could you put that in a sentence?
Yes. The evidence we've collected over the years includes tons of vocal recordings. We've had some really spectacular ones from here on this property, very clear, them speaking to us in English, that it is not a human voice. The footprints, foot casts, there's a handprint from the dust in my car on my window where one leaned against the window. We've gotten handprints off of Matt's. It was back at the Suburban he used to own. We would go out for a walk and we would come back and there would be geometric designs laid out along the path that were not there when we left and were there when we came back. And it didn't look like something a squirrel would do. As I said, lots of footprints. And then there have been visuals too. And now, as we've learned to see them in that shimmering energy form, the visuals are almost constant now that we're no longer looking for that physical manifestation.
And when you say visuals, you mean photos?
In terms of the visuals that we've had, Matt's got a lot of photographs. There's a frame capture off of a video recently that is truly phenomenal. And then there's also the visuals just of us seeing them. One of the early trips up, I got to see one of the little ones on hands and knees going just fast as could be, and it was not a bear. I grew up with black bears. I know what a black bear looks like. That was not a black bear. And then I have not had as many of those physical visuals as Matt has, but there was that one, and then there's another one when I saw the mother with a child following behind it. And I saw that for a couple of seconds before they moved off again.
Where does it go? Here, let me just check this real quick. I'll ask you. I loved how you brought it around to we passed this stage of proving things, and now it was like, okay, we're done proving. Let's talk, essentially. And where does that lead to?
Matt and I've had a lot of conversations about what next. Where is this journey going to take us? Because it's certainly, we've gone down a route that neither of us could have predicted 10 years ago. And there are times, I wake up, I go to work, I come home, and I have to really stop and shake myself and say, you're living a truly extraordinary experience. And we've gone from that, that initial trying to figure out how to engage, how to connect. We thought we were habituating them. No, they were habituating us. They were getting us past our fear, past our preconceptions, past our assumptions, to kind of letting all that fall by the side and say, okay, who are these beings truly that we're interacting with? And then once they were able to set up the communication with Matt through the mind speak, then we could move to the next level. So now we've got that level, we're interacting with them. There's very direct communication through Matt. There's a very direct interaction with the people who come here to visit. So what's next? We really don't know. Like I said, we never would have predicted that we would be where we are now, even 5 years ago. So where are we going to be 3 years from now? All we know is that they're wanting to continue to reach out to us. They're wanting us to continue to have people here to learn how to reach out to them. What the end game is, they play their cards pretty close to their chest. It's more of a journey, I think, than an outcome-based process. It's not like this is going to be the end. This is the final piece of this. This is going to be a journey that goes on for the rest of our lives.
What do you feel like you've learned so far?
Oh man. To say what I've learned in the process of this journey is really, really tough to narrow down. For one thing, there's a joy in knowing that the world really is bigger than we were taught. There have been a couple of instances where there's been a brief contact with the Xanue, where I have felt just this pure outpouring of love. And that's not something we as humans experience. So I've learned that there's connections that we as humans really need to work on restoring. Learning to, like I said, rather than try and put everything in the boxes as I go, allowing myself to just experience as things happen, and then over time those patterns will become more apparent to me, and I don't have to go through that, is it real? Is it Memorex? Is it real? Is it Memorex? At the time, I can just let myself experience it, and that to me has been a tremendous learning path. The other thing is the people that I've met through this process, truly extraordinary.
That's actually what I wanted to talk about next, because you guys, I think maybe the sort of preconceived idea that people would have of these sort of like loners out in the woods, and you guys aren't like that at all. I mean, you guys are very social, right? You guys have a lot. It's not just the two of you. It's a lot of different, there's a lot of people involved in your life and in this.
The community that has kind of come to us as a result of our experiences and Matt's role, he loves to teach, he loves to share, he loves to experience things and have other people share those experiences. That's kind of foreign to me. I'm an IT geek, I'm an introvert. If you told me 10 years ago, I would be comfortable as I am with the number of people I meet through this process, the people who have come to our conferences, the people who have come to our property. But the thing that has been a joy and a treasure to me, because these people are extraordinary. And the community that we are building is such a generous and warm and caring group of people. And I find myself outgrowing this shyness that I have fought since I was a young person. And that's been a growth for me that has been an outcome of basically the extrovert Nat grabbing me by the scruff of the neck saying, come on, we're gonna do this. And I haven't died yet, as he keeps reminding me. So that has been one of the truly most powerful treasures for me in the journey. And people will say, you know, you open your house, you let people come into your lives in ways that people don't do. And that's one of the other things that in this journey with the Xanue that we are learning. They're open like that. And they're pushing us to be more open like them and reaching out to people in ways that really, like I said, I would never have guessed I would be able to do this 5 years ago.
What is your hope for yourself and for the people who encounter as a result of all this? What is your ultimate sort of hope?
What we hope for the people who come here, and what I hope for myself, is that they experience that our world is bigger than we were taught. They experience that there is a level of connection that can be achieved, that if we allow ourselves to be more vulnerable, that if we allow ourselves to be more open, it can be a safe thing. And to have a community in which they develop friendships, that they can talk about this in a safe environment where they're not going to be ridiculed. You know, you have to be really careful who you talk to about the subject, because a lot of people will just roll their eyes and say, well, yeah, right. Oh, those footprints were all just hoaxed. It's all a hoax. And you hit that wall. So the people who come here and have these experiences then have a community of people they can continue to share those experiences with. And that makes it easier for them to have more experiences, because then they're not back in that box saying, is it real? Is it real? No, it can't be real, because people make fun of me if I say it's real. So helping people bridge that gap and move forward with trusting their senses, trusting what they're experiencing, and trusting really what you start feeling with your heart when you're around the Xanue for any period of time.
How would you describe your sense of community before all this versus now?
Before I met Matt and before I became involved in this, like I said, I'm an IT geek. IT people are notorious for being introverts, and I definitely met that characterization, and I was working really hard at coming out of that shell even before I met Matt. But this community of people that we've built up around us, people who've come to our conferences, people who, before we had the property here, went down to Oregon with Matt. We've forged friendships that are truly extraordinary. And we talk about this too sometimes. We only know the people that we interact with directly, but they go back home and they interact with people. And the people they interact with and they teach and share what they've experienced interact with other people. So we see that the first couple of rings in the pond from where the pebble is hit, but we don't see how much further those rings reach. And I think that's one of the other things that is easy to lose sight of, is that for every person we contact, have direct interaction with, there's this ripple effect beyond them. And that's kind of awe-inspiring when you think about it.
I mean, the funny thing about that is that that's true for everyone, but people don't embrace it or think about it.
I think that's one of the things as humans that we diminish or don't really believe in, is how much impact a single person can have in a single interaction with another person. Because the ripple effect I was talking about before, someone's having a bad day, as simple as a smile, hope the rest of your day goes better, then maybe they're gonna pass it on to somebody else. Those ripples of simple kindness and courtesy and humanity, we recognize that can happen. And this interaction with the Xanue, the experiences we have, the people who come here, is that same thing. It's, I have a conversation with somebody who's here, and then we share ideas. They get a glimmer of something, they go back home, they talk to a friend, and they share that conversation, and that lights off a light bulb for that person, and maybe they feel better about what's going on in their life. And how much power is inherent in that is something that we really don't recognize.
So this is my last question. How do you see your role in all this?
I sometimes struggle with my role in all this. Matt is definitely the socially gregarious, outgoing, he's the front man. He's definitely the focus of a lot of the attention. So my role is supporting him, of course, in that role. But what we've also found over the years is, and this was true even when he was out speaking on his parenting program, there were people who, when he was done speaking, were very comfortable walking up to him and talking to him. There were other people that were a little awestruck, oh, that's Dr. J. And they would be more comfortable coming and talking to me. And I see the same thing in the events that go on here. There's the people who, no problem, it's Dr. J, they're going to be right in there talking to him. There's people who are a little more shy, maybe a little awestruck. They're more comfortable coming to me. So I kind of fill that gap within this. And it just, opposites attract, opposites complement each other. So Matt and I have that opposite, that contrast that really complements each other. And, the way he communicates, because he's outgoing, he looks at everything from more of the social interaction standpoint. I'm more the analytical. So people who come in, you've got, the kind of monkey chatter and analytic brain I have, I'm able to help them kind of get past it, learn from the lessons I've learned. And so that's where I see my role in this whole thing.
So between the two of you,
Yeah, between the two of us, we very much create kind of a whole for people. And, even just the way things are expressed, sometimes you can hear things better from one person than you can from the other. So I share my experiences because my view is a little different, because I don't experience them as directly as Matt does, but I still have my experiences, I still have my interactions, I've still been very much touched by the Xanue. They have gone out of their way to leave me some very significant glyphs and stuff that they obviously put together minutes before I came down the trail. And it was fresh grass wrapped around a stick. There's no way that happened by accident. They put that there for me. So my ability to kind of reassure people, okay, you aren't seeing it. That person just walked in there seeing everything, and you're sitting there going, what's wrong with me? There's nothing wrong with you. You're simply going to experience things differently than Matt. You're going to experience things differently than that person down there who can already see the shimmering images. Okay, don't worry about what you're seeing with your eyes. What are you seeing with your heart? What are you seeing through this experience with these other people? What are you feeling as you go down this path? And so people get a little bit more faith, belief in themselves, because they know somebody else who's traveled that path, who it's harder for.
is there anything else you'd like to say on this?
The last thing I'd like to say is just, as I mentioned earlier, I think this is the tip of the iceberg. We've got a lot to learn. We don't know where we're going from here, what's going to happen next. All I know is what's important is the people, the contacts, the connections between us and people, the connections between us and the Xanue, the connections between the people we interact with and how they learn how to interact with the Xanue. And that's, who knows? I have no idea. All I know is it's going to be surprising.
That's a good place to end it. you mind if I film you getting up and walking out?
Nope, I can do that.
He's doing a Bigfoot documentary, so.
Oh.
Smile, you're on camera. He was, film
Request, interviewed Matt last night, interviewed me this morning, and then just picking up the page from the property.
Nice.
Yes. On Thanksgiving Day, too.
Point to the tree that you want all these.
Okay, Chuck might have to get it. It's
Okay.
above the refrigerator on the left-hand side. It's a big pottery, no, yes, perfect. And then in the, the third drawer under the microwave, that's the fourth. There's another one there. Those little white bowls on the right-hand side,
On the right.
can be used for some of the juicier stuff, and then the little glass bowls as well. Because they have a lot of different flavors of olives and stuff. And then there's a veggie tray.
Is there another tray up there?
No, there's a vegetable tray put together from a mile. I think
It's still there?
Yeah. The first time I walked by him,
Can I
was
serve you some
walking out
turkey?
and snagged me
You
up.
want
Right,
that or
right.
what?
That was nice that he did that.
I'm driving.
There you go. A little more?
Yeah.
Ooh, the potatoes are lovely. Who did the potatoes? I wonder.
I think it's green bean.
The mashed potato master
The mashed
did.
potatoes are so lovely.
The mashed potato
They're
master
so
did the potatoes.
Fluffy.
Oh, okay, green bean.
Yes.
That's green beans,
This
okay.
is, okay, here you go.
Well, there you have it, boys and girls. I thought it was an awesome interview, and I thought I was supposed to be the one interviewing Cynthia when Zorth brought it up a few weeks ago, but it turned out that obviously Bill Badgley did a much better job of interviewing than I could have ever have done, and it was pretty fun. We had a great Thanksgiving Day with a bunch of friends, and I don't know about you guys, but I'm looking forward to an awesome Christmas season as well. And Cynthia and I hope all of you enjoy Christmas with family and friends in spite of any dictatorial edicts trying to discourage you from doing so. And always remember, on November the 3rd, the night of the elections, Zorth predicted, and you've seen a lot of videos here and a lot of postings with him continuing to tell me to remind everybody else, in the end, Trump wins. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.